The history of the United States, from native lands to a global superpower, the country we know today as one of the most powerful nations on Earth, the United States of America, was not born in a single day. And long before Europeans ever set foot on this land, this vast continent was far from empty. For thousands of years, North America was home to the continent's indigenous peoples, whom we commonly call Native Americans or American Indians. They belonged to hundreds of distinct cultures, spoke their own languages, followed their own traditions, and lived in remarkable harmony with the natural world. Today, the United States officially recognizes 575 federally recognized Native American tribes, carrying forward traditions and cultures that have existed for centuries. But in the late 15th century, everything began to change. When European explorers arrived on the shores of North America, the lives of indigenous peoples were transformed forever. Armed conflicts, forced displacement, colonization, and deadly diseases brought from Europe devastated countless indigenous communities. One of the greatest human tragedies in history was unfolding across the continent. Then came the year 1607. The English crossed the Atlantic and established Jamestown, their first permanent settlement in North America. Survival was anything but easy. The settlers struggled against starvation, disease, harsh weather, and an unfamiliar environment. 13 years later, in 1620, another historic journey took place. A ship called the Mayflower arrived at Plymouth carrying 102 passengers. These settlers had crossed the Atlantic hoping to find religious freedom and build a new life. They became known as the Pilgrims. Over time, 13 separate British colonies were established along the eastern coast of North America. These colonies were ruled by the British Crown, but despite being under British authority, many colonists increasingly believed that they should have the right to govern themselves. By the middle of the 18th century, Britain and France were fighting for control of North America. This conflict became known as the French and Indian War. Britain eventually won the war, but victory came at an enormous financial cost. The British government was left deeply in debt, so Parliament came up with a solution. If Britain had fought to protect the colonies, then surely the colonists should help pay for the war. And so Britain began imposing a series of new taxes. Taxes were placed on tea, paper, sugar, and many other goods. The colonists were furious. Their message was simple: no taxation without representation. In other words, if the colonists had no representatives in the British Parliament, why should they be forced to pay taxes imposed by that Parliament? Tensions continued to rise. Then in 1773, one of the most famous acts of protest in American history took place. It became known as the Boston Tea Party. American colonists protested British taxation by throwing large quantities of tea into Boston Harbor. Britain responded with a series of harsh measures known as the Intolerable Acts. Boston Harbor was closed, colonial self-government was restricted, and British control became even tighter. The situation had reached a breaking point. Then came April 19, 1775. At Lexington and Concord, what had once been political tension turned into armed conflict. Shots were fired. The American Revolution had begun. The Second Continental Congress quickly took action. An army was organized, and an experienced military leader was chosen as its commander-in-chief, George Washington. The war continued. Then, on July 4, 1776, one of the most important moments in American history took place. A document drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson was approved by the Continental Congress. The 13 colonies declared their independence from Great Britain. A new nation was born, the United States of America, but independence did not come easily. For years, American forces fought against the British. With crucial military and financial assistance from France, and under the leadership of George Washington, the Americans eventually gained the upper hand. After years of bloodshed, the war finally came to an end. On September 3, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. Great Britain formally recognized the independence and sovereignty of the United States. The war was over, but another enormous challenge remained. How could 13 independent states be united under one government? How could a new nation create a political system that was strong enough to survive, yet based on principles of liberty and justice? In 1787, delegates from across the new nation gathered in Philadelphia. They debated, argued, compromised, and ultimately created one of the most influential political documents in history, the United States Constitution. The Constitution came into effect in 1789, establishing the framework of the new federal government. But another question remained. Where were the guarantees for the rights of ordinary citizens? The answer came in 1791. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution were ratified and became known collectively as the Bill of Rights. These amendments protected fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and important rights related to justice and due process. George Washington became the first president of the United States, and a new nation had emerged on the world stage. But the story of America is far more complex than the birth of a powerful nation. It is a story that began thousands of years before independence, with the indigenous peoples who called this land home. It is a story of European colonization, conflict, disease, displacement, resistance, and immense human suffering. It is a story of 13 colonies that challenged an empire. It is a story of revolution, sacrifice, independence, and the creation of a new constitutional system. From the ancient civilizations of Native America to the American Revolution, from the Declaration of Independence to the Constitution, these events laid the foundations of the country we know today as the United States of America. The powerful United States we see today was shaped by centuries of struggle, conflict, ambition, sacrifice, and the pursuit of freedom. Behind the world's most influential superpower lies a long and often painful history. This is the story of how America was born. If you enjoyed this video, let us know your thoughts in the comments. For more fascinating history documentaries and stories from the past, subscribe to our channel and stay with us. Thank you for watching.